In the quiet hush of ancient times, long before the clamor of modern life, the human mind began its slow, deliberate dance with profound questions. Questions about existence, purpose, morality, and the very nature of reality itself. These were not merely idle musings, but the foundational stones upon which entire civilizations would eventually be built. From the bustling marketplaces of Athens to the serene riverbanks of the Ganges, voices began to whisper, to ponder, to articulate ideas that would resonate for millennia, shaping the way we think, feel, and understand our place in the vast, indifferent cosmos. These whispers, initially faint and scattered, gradually coalesced into distinct schools of thought, each offering a unique lens through which to view the world, a unique path towards wisdom and inner peace. Tonight, we embark on a gentle journey through these ancient philosophical landscapes. We will not rush, nor will we seek dramatic revelations. Instead, we will allow the subtle currents of these historical ideas to carry us, like a quiet stream, through the corridors of time. Our purpose is not to solve grand philosophical dilemmas, but simply to observe, to appreciate the enduring human quest for understanding, and perhaps, in the stillness of our listening, to find a measure of tranquility in the echoes of these ancient voices. Let us begin with one of the most fundamental and enduring inquiries: the search for a life well lived, a pursuit that captivated the minds of the early Greek thinkers. Consider, for a moment, the bustling agora of ancient Athens, a vibrant hub of commerce, politics, and intellectual discourse. Amidst the haggling merchants and impassioned orators, a figure might be seen, often barefoot and simply clad, engaging citizens in earnest conversation. This was Socrates, not a writer of books, but a living embodiment of philosophical inquiry, whose profound influence stemmed from his unique method of questioning. He did not claim to possess ultimate wisdom, but rather sought to expose the limits of human knowledge, particularly his own, and to encourage others to critically examine their deeply held beliefs. His famous declaration, "The unexamined life is not worth living," encapsulates the very essence of his philosophical approach. For Socrates, true wisdom lay not in accumulating facts, but in acknowledging one's ignorance and relentlessly pursuing self-knowledge. He believed that virtue was knowledge, and that vice stemmed from ignorance. If one truly understood what was good, they would naturally act virtuously. This was a radical departure from conventional thought, which often attributed moral failings to weakness of will or divine disfavor. His method, now known as the Socratic method, involved a dialectical process of asking a series of probing questions designed to reveal contradictions in a person's initial assumptions. Imagine a bustling Athenian artisan confidently asserting their expertise in justice, only to find their definition crumbling under Socrates' gentle yet persistent questioning. This was not done out of malice, but out of a deep conviction that by dismantling false beliefs, one could gradually approach a more accurate understanding of truth. He believed that knowledge was innate within each individual, waiting to be midwifed through rigorous inquiry, a concept he attributed to his own mother, a midwife. The goal was not to win an argument, but to foster intellectual humility and a genuine love for wisdom. The impact of Socrates was immeasurable, even though he left no written works himself. His legacy was meticulously preserved and expanded upon by his illustrious student, Plato. Plato, initially a student of Socrates, later founded the Academy in Athens, often considered the first institution of higher learning in the Western world. Through his dialogues, Plato presented Socratic conversations, often with Socrates as the main character, exploring a vast array of philosophical topics. It is through Plato's writings that we gain most of our understanding of Socrates' teachings, although distinguishing between the historical Socrates and Plato's interpretation can sometimes be a subtle challenge. Plato's own philosophy, however, extended far beyond the Socratic emphasis on ethics and self-knowledge. He grappled with profound metaphysical questions, most famously developing the theory of forms. This theory posits that the physical world we perceive with our senses is merely a shadowy imitation of a more perfect, unchanging realm of ideal forms. For example, a particular tree in our world is only an imperfect reflection of the universal form of treeness that exists in this transcendent realm. Similarly, justice, beauty, and goodness are not mere human constructs or subjective opinions, but rather objective and eternal forms that exist independently of our minds. Our understanding of these forms is often clouded by our reliance on sensory experience, which is inherently flawed and deceptive. True knowledge, according to Plato, could only be attained through intellectual contemplation, by ascending beyond the sensory world to grasp the pure forms themselves. This ascent, for Plato, was a deeply spiritual and intellectual journey, often allegorized in his famous allegory of the cave. In this allegory, prisoners are chained in a cave, only able to see shadows projected on a wall, believing these shadows to be reality. One prisoner escapes, ascends to the light of the sun, and realizes the true nature of reality. Upon returning to the cave, he attempts to enlighten his fellow prisoners, but they ridicule and threaten him, unwilling to abandon their comfortable illusion. This allegory serves as a powerful metaphor for the philosopher's arduous path to truth and the resistance often met by those who seek to illuminate it. It speaks to the difficulty of breaking free from ingrained perceptions and the challenges of intellectual enlightenment. Plato's Republic, one of his most influential works, delves into the nature of justice and the ideal state. He envisioned a society governed by philosopher kings, individuals who, through rigorous training and intellectual discipline, had attained knowledge of the forms and were thus best equipped to rule with wisdom and justice. This hierarchical structure, where each individual performs the role best suited to their natural abilities, was designed to achieve harmony and stability within the city-state. It was a vision that, while perhaps utopian and potentially authoritarian in its implications, underscored Plato's deep concern for ethical governance and the pursuit of a just society. His ideas on education, governance, and the nature of the soul have permeated Western thought, laying groundwork for political theory, metaphysics, and epistemology. The Socratic questioning and Platonic idealism, though distinct, were intertwined, laying a monumental groundwork for subsequent philosophical inquiry. Their discussions about virtue, knowledge, and reality continue to echo through time, inviting us to pause and consider the foundations of our own understanding. The persistent whisper of know thyself and the soaring vision of an ideal world beyond our immediate grasp remain compelling invitations to deeper reflection. From the grand, sweeping idealism of Plato, our focus now gently shifts to his most brilliant student, a mind so encyclopedic in its scope that his influence would shape intellectual inquiry for nearly 2 millennia. This was Aristotle, born in Stagira, Macedon, and a student at Plato's academy for some 20 years. While deeply influenced by his mentor, Aristotle also forged his own distinct philosophical path, one characterized by a profound commitment to empirical observation, logical reasoning, and a systematic approach to understanding the natural world and human society. He was, in many ways, the first true scientist, meticulously categorizing and analyzing everything from biology and physics to ethics and politics. Unlike Plato's emphasis on a transcendent realm of forms, Aristotle grounded his philosophy firmly in the observable world. He believed that knowledge could be derived from studying particular things and their inherent properties. For him, the essence of a thing was not found in a separate, abstract realm, but was intrinsic to the thing itself. For example, to understand horseness, one should study actual horses, their characteristics, their behaviors, and their development, rather than contemplating an abstract form of horse. This practical, empirical approach laid the foundations for scientific methodology and the classification of knowledge into distinct disciplines. Aristotle's contributions to logic were foundational and enduring. He developed the first formal system of deductive reasoning, most famously the syllogism. A syllogism is a type of logical argument that applies deductive reasoning to arrive at a conclusion based on two or more propositions that are asserted or assumed to be true. For instance, all men are mortal. Socrates is a man. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. This systematic approach to argumentation provided a powerful tool for intellectual inquiry, allowing for clear and precise reasoning. His works on logic, collectively known as the Organon, were considered the definitive word on the subject for centuries and continue to be studied by logicians today. In ethics, Aristotle presented a nuanced and practical philosophy centered on the concept of eudaimonia, often translated as flourishing or living well, rather than simply happiness. For Aristotle, eudaimonia was the ultimate goal of human life, achieved not through fleeting pleasures or external goods, but through the cultivation of virtue. His ethical framework, expounded in the Nicomachean Ethics, is known as virtue ethics. He argued that virtues are character traits that enable individuals to live excellently. These virtues, such as courage, temperance, generosity, and justice, are not innate but developed through practice and habituation. Crucially, Aristotle emphasized the golden mean, the idea that virtue lies in a balance between two extremes, avoiding both excess and deficiency. For example, courage is the mean between cowardice, deficiency, and recklessness, excess. Similarly, generosity is the mean between stinginess and prodigality. Finding this mean requires practical wisdom, phronsis, the ability to discern the right course of action in specific situations. It is not a rigid rule, but a flexible understanding honed through experience and reflection. This focus on character development and practical wisdom made Aristotle's ethics profoundly influential and highly applicable to the complexities of human life. His political philosophy, outlined in Politics, was equally influential. He analyzed different forms of government, monarchy, aristocracy, and polity, a mixed constitution, and their corresponding corruptions, tyranny, oligarchy, and democracy, which he viewed as rule by the poor for the benefit of the poor, prone to instability. Aristotle believed that the best form of government was one that aimed at the common good and fostered the eudaimonia of its citizens. He also famously stated that man is by nature a political animal, emphasizing that human beings are inherently social, and that the polis, or city-state, is the natural setting for human flourishing. His detailed observations of various constitutions in Greek city-states provided a comparative framework that was unprecedented for its time. Aristotle's work extended to metaphysics, where he explored the nature of being and reality. He proposed a system of 4 causes to explain why things are the way they are. The material cause, what something is made of; the formal cause, its shape or structure; the efficient cause, what brought it into existence; and the final cause, its purpose or telos. This teleological view, where everything has an inherent purpose or end, was central to his understanding of the natural world. He also posited the concept of an unmoved mover, a primary cause that initiates all motion in the universe, but is itself unmoved, a concept that would later be adopted and adapted by medieval theologians. The profound scope of Aristotle's thought, from the minutiae of biological classification to the grand questions of ethics and governance, left an indelible mark on Western civilization. For centuries, he was simply referred to as the philosopher. His systematic approach to knowledge, his emphasis on observation and logic, and his practical wisdom provided a robust intellectual framework that profoundly influenced Islamic scholars and later medieval European thinkers like Thomas Aquinas. His legacy continues to inform fields as diverse as logic, ethics, political science, biology, and literary criticism. The quiet dedication to understanding the world as it is, rather than as it ideally might be, remains a powerful testament to his enduring genius. As the echoes of Athenian wisdom begin to fade, let us prepare to shift our gaze eastward, to a different philosophical current that arose amidst the turmoil and transformation of ancient China. The profound insights born from these distant lands offer a contrasting yet equally rich tapestry of thought, centered not on the individual's pursuit of eudaimonia, but on the harmonious order of society and the cultivation of character through ancient traditions. While the ancient Greeks were pondering the forms and the golden mean across a vast continent, in what is now modern-day China, another profound intellectual awakening was taking place. This period, often referred to as the Spring and Autumn, 771–476 BCE, and Warring States, 475–221 BCE periods, was a time of immense social and political upheaval. As old feudal structures crumbled and numerous rival states vied for supremacy, society was in disarray. Yet, amidst this chaos, a vibrant intellectual flourishing occurred, giving rise to diverse philosophical schools that sought to understand human nature, good governance, and the path to social harmony. This era, known as the 100 Schools of Thought, produced ideas that would shape Chinese civilization for millennia, much like Greek philosophy shaped the West. Among the most influential of these schools, and perhaps the most enduring, was Confucianism. Confucius, or Kongfuzi, lived from approximately 551 to 479 BCE, a contemporary of the early Greek philosophers. Unlike the Greeks, who often focused on abstract metaphysical questions, Confucius was primarily concerned with practical ethics, morality, and the cultivation of an orderly and harmonious society. He was deeply disturbed by the moral decay and incessant warfare of his time, and believed that the key to societal stability lay in the revival of ancient traditions, the cultivation of personal virtue, and the proper conduct of human relationships. His teachings, primarily recorded by his disciples in the Analects, emphasize the importance of Ren, Li, and Yi. Ren, often translated as humaneness or benevolence, is perhaps the most central concept in Confucian ethics. It refers to the ideal character of a virtuous person, embodying empathy, compassion, and altruism in interactions with others. It's about treating others as you would wish to be treated, a concept remarkably similar to the Golden Rule found in many other traditions. Confucius believed that cultivating Ren began within the individual and then extended outward to family, community, and ultimately the state. It was not a passive quality, but an active, cultivated virtue, requiring constant self-reflection and effort. Li, which translates to rights, rituals, or propriety, refers to the established norms of proper conduct in all aspects of life, from grand ceremonies to everyday interactions. For Confucius, Li was not merely about rigid adherence to rules, but about expressing respect, sincerity, and appropriateness in one's behavior. It provided a framework for social order, ensuring that individuals knew their roles and responsibilities within various relationships. By observing Li, individuals could demonstrate their ren and contribute to the smooth functioning of society. It was the outward manifestation of inner virtue, creating a dignified and respectful social environment. Yi, meaning righteousness or justice, refers to the moral disposition to do what is right and appropriate in a given situation, even when it is difficult or goes against personal interest. While Li provided the guidelines, Yi provided the moral compass, ensuring that actions were not just formally correct, but also ethically sound. A person with Yi would act according to moral principle, prioritizing the collective good over selfish desires. The interplay between Ren, Li, and Yi formed the core of Confucian moral philosophy, creating a comprehensive system for ethical living and social harmony. Confucius also placed immense importance on specific social relationships, particularly what are known as the 5 relationships: ruler and subject, father and son, husband and wife, older brother and younger brother, and friends. He believed that if each individual understood their role and obligations within these foundational relationships, acting with mutual respect and benevolence, then harmony would naturally extend throughout society. The family, particularly the father-son relationship, was seen as the fundamental unit, serving as a microcosm for the state. Filial piety, the respect and devotion shown by children to their parents, was considered a cornerstone of ethical behavior and social order. Education was another critical component of Confucian thought. Confucius believed that anyone, regardless of social standing, could achieve moral cultivation through diligent study and self-improvement. He championed the idea of a meritocracy, where individuals ascended to positions of power based on their virtue and knowledge, rather than inherited status. This emphasis on education and the cultivation of scholarly officials had a profound and lasting impact on the Chinese imperial examination system, which for centuries selected civil servants based on their mastery of Confucian classics. While Confucianism provided a structured path to social harmony, another distinct voice emerged during the Warring States period, offering a radically different perspective on human nature and the path to peace: Taoism. Its foundational text, the Tao Te Ching, is attributed to the semi-legendary figure of Laozi, believed to have lived sometime in the 6th century BCE, although his historical existence is debated. Unlike the active, prescriptive nature of Confucianism, Taoism advocates for a more passive, naturalistic approach to life. The central concept in Taoism is the Tao, often translated as the way. However, the Tao is described as something that cannot be fully named or defined, a cosmic principle that underlies and permeates all existence. It is the spontaneous, flowing, and ever-changing force of the universe, the natural order of things. Unlike the Confucian emphasis on human-made rules and rituals, Taoism encourages alignment with the natural flow of the Tao. This often involves Wu Wei, a concept frequently misunderstood as inaction. Instead, Wu Wei means non-action in the sense of effortless action, action that is in harmony with the natural rhythms of the universe, rather than forced or artificial. It is about letting go of excessive striving, egoistic desires, and rigid control, allowing things to unfold naturally. The Taoist ideal is the uncarved block, representing simplicity, naturalness, and a state free from artificial distinctions and societal impositions. The pursuit of knowledge for Taoists often involves unlearning conventional wisdom and embracing a more intuitive, holistic understanding. They advocate for living in tune with nature, appreciating simplicity, and cultivating inner peace through contemplation and detachment from worldly concerns. While Confucians sought to reform society through active moral cultivation, Taoists often advocated for withdrawal from the complexities of society, finding wisdom in solitude and the natural world. The interplay between Confucianism and Taoism profoundly shaped Chinese intellectual history. While seemingly contradictory, they often served as complementary forces. Confucianism provided the framework for social order and public life, while Taoism offered a path for individual spiritual retreat and a connection to nature. Many Chinese intellectuals historically found value in both traditions, practicing Confucian ethics in their public roles and embracing Taoist principles in their private lives, seeking balance between social engagement and natural spontaneity. As these ancient Chinese whispers begin to settle, we have observed a shift from the individual to the collective, from rigorous logic to harmonious flow. These contrasting approaches, born from different societal needs and perspectives, each offered compelling answers to the fundamental questions of human existence and the pursuit of a well-ordered life. As the philosophical currents of Greece and China began to carve their distinct paths, a spiritual and intellectual awakening was simultaneously unfolding on the Indian subcontinent, giving rise to systems of thought that would shape a vast portion of the world's spiritual landscape. These ancient Indian philosophies, though diverse, often shared a common thread: a profound exploration of the nature of consciousness, the cycle of existence, and the ultimate path to liberation from suffering. Among the most influential of these traditions, and one that resonates deeply with the boring history for sleep ethos due to its emphasis on calm contemplation, is Buddhism. Buddhism originated with Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, who lived in ancient India around the 6th to 5th centuries BCE, making him a rough contemporary of Confucius and some of the early Greek philosophers. Born a prince in a kingdom near the border of modern-day Nepal and India, Siddhartha lived a life of sheltered luxury. However, upon encountering the realities of old age, sickness, and death outside his palace walls, he became deeply troubled by the pervasive nature of suffering in the world. This profound realization propelled him to renounce his princely life, abandon his family, and embark on a spiritual quest for enlightenment, seeking an end to suffering. After years of intense asceticism and meditation, Siddhartha finally achieved enlightenment while meditating under a bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya. It was at this moment that he became the Buddha, meaning the awakened one. His subsequent teachings, known as the Dharma, form the core of Buddhist philosophy and practice. Unlike many religious traditions that focus on a supreme deity, Buddhism is primarily a philosophy and a way of life centered on understanding the nature of suffering and the path to its cessation. The cornerstone of Buddhist philosophy is the teaching of the Four Noble Truths. These truths are not presented as dogmas to be blindly accepted, but as observations about the human condition to be investigated and understood through one's own experience. The first noble truth is dukkha, often translated as suffering, but encompassing a broader sense of dissatisfaction, unease, and imperfection inherent in existence. This includes obvious physical pain, but also the subtle suffering of impermanence, the anxiety of change, and the dissatisfaction that arises even from pleasurable experiences because they are fleeting. The second noble truth is samudaya, the origin or cause of suffering. The Buddha identified this cause as tanha, craving, or attachment. It is not merely desire for pleasant things, but the grasping, clinging, and aversion that arises from our misguided belief in a permanent, separate self. This attachment leads to endless cycles of wanting and dissatisfaction. The third noble truth is nirodha, the cessation of suffering. This is the ultimate goal of Buddhist practice, the complete eradication of craving and attachment, leading to a state of profound peace and liberation known as nirvana. Nirvana is not a heavenly afterlife, but a state achievable in this life, characterized by the absence of suffering, greed, hatred, and delusion. The fourth noble truth is magga, the path to the cessation of suffering. This is the Eightfold Path, a practical guide for ethical conduct, mental discipline, and wisdom. The Eightfold Path is often divided into three main categories. 1. Wisdom, panna, O right understanding, comprehending the Four Noble Truths. O right thought, cultivating thoughts of goodwill, nonviolence, and detachment. 2. Moral conduct, sila, O right speech, avoiding lying, harsh language, slander, and idle chatter. O right action, refraining from killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. O right livelihood, engaging in occupations that do not harm others. 3. Mental discipline, samadhi, O right effort, striving to prevent unwholesome states and cultivate wholesome ones. O right mindfulness, paying attention to the present moment without judgment, observing thoughts, feelings, and sensations. O right concentration, developing deep states of meditative absorption to gain insight. The concept of anatta, or no self, is another fundamental and often challenging aspect of Buddhist philosophy. Unlike many Western and other Eastern traditions that posit a permanent, unchanging soul or self, Buddhism argues that there is no fixed, independent self. What we perceive as self is merely a collection of constantly changing physical and mental phenomena. Form, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness, all interconnected and impermanent. Understanding anatta is crucial for overcoming attachment and realizing nirvana. Another key doctrine is anicca, or impermanence. All compounded phenomena are subject to change, decay, and dissolution. Nothing lasts forever. This understanding helps to release attachment to transient things and cultivate equanimity in the face of life's inevitable changes. Coupled with dukkha, suffering, dissatisfaction, and anatta, no self, anicca forms the three marks of existence, the fundamental characteristics of all phenomena. The principle of karma is also central, though distinct from the more rigid interpretations found in some other Indian traditions. In Buddhism, karma refers to volitional actions, intentions, and their consequences. Wholesome actions driven by compassion and wisdom lead to positive outcomes, while unwholesome actions driven by greed, hatred, and delusion lead to negative ones. It's not a divine judgment, but a natural law of cause and effect. The cycle of rebirth, or samsara, is driven by this karma until liberation is achieved. Meditation plays a pivotal role in Buddhist practice. Through practices like samatha, calm abiding, and vipassana, insight meditation, practitioners cultivate mental concentration, mindfulness, and ultimately, wisdom. The goal is to observe the mind's workings, recognize the impermanent and selfless nature of phenomena, and thereby extinguish the roots of suffering. It is a path of direct experience and inner transformation, rather than intellectual assent. The teachings of the Buddha, initially transmitted orally, were later compiled into vast collections of scriptures, most notably the Pali Canon. Over centuries, Buddhism spread from India throughout Asia, adapting to local cultures and giving rise to various schools, such as Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana, each with its unique interpretations and practices, yet all fundamentally rooted in the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. The silent wisdom of the Buddha, the quiet quest for an end to suffering, and the gentle path of mindfulness offer a calming counterpoint to the often chaotic nature of existence. It is a philosophy that encourages introspection, self-awareness, and a profound understanding of the interconnectedness of all things. As we let these ancient Indian whispers resonate, we are invited to consider a life not defined by external achievements, but by inner peace and freedom. Having explored the refined pursuit of pleasure in Epicureanism, our philosophical journey in the Hellenistic world now turns to a path of stark contrast: Stoicism. This school of thought, which arose around the same time as Epicureanism, offered a profoundly different blueprint for achieving inner peace and a life well lived, not through the avoidance of pain, but through the cultivation of virtue, reason, and an unwavering acceptance of what is beyond our control. Stoicism became immensely influential, attracting adherents from all walks of life, from slaves like Epictetus to emperors like Marcus Aurelius, proving its powerful appeal across the social spectrum. The Stoic school was founded in Athens around 300 BCE by Zeno of Citium, who taught his philosophy from the Stoa Poikel, or painted porch, a public colonnade, from which the school derived its name. Unlike the exclusive garden of Epicurus, the Stoa was open to all, reflecting the Stoic belief that virtue and wisdom were accessible to anyone willing to apply reason and discipline. While Epicureanism sought ataraxia through the absence of disturbance, Stoicism aimed for apatheia, not apathy in the modern sense of indifference, but a state of freedom from disruptive passions and emotions, achieved through reason and self-control. The core of Stoic philosophy revolves around the distinction between what is within our control and what is not. This is perhaps their most enduring and practical teaching. According to the Stoics, the only things truly within our control are our judgments, our opinions, our desires, our aversions, and our actions, in short, our internal responses to the world. Everything else, external events, other people's actions, our reputation, our health, wealth, and even our bodies, are ultimately outside our control. The Stoics believed that much of human suffering stems from striving to control what is uncontrollable and becoming emotionally disturbed by external events. The key to Stoic tranquility lies in aligning one's will with nature and accepting the course of events as they unfold. This is not a passive resignation, but an active, reasoned acceptance. If an external event occurs, the Stoic asks, "Is this within my control?" If the answer is no, then the appropriate response is acceptance, and to focus one's energy on what is within control, one's judgment of the event. For example, if it rains on your parade, you cannot control the rain, but you can control your attitude towards it. You can choose to be frustrated, or you can choose to find an opportunity for reflection or a new activity. Virtue, for the Stoics, was the sole good and the only thing truly worth pursuing. They identified four cardinal virtues: wisdom, practical knowledge of what is good, bad, and indifferent; courage, facing difficulty with integrity; justice, treating others fairly; and temperance, self-control and moderation. These virtues were not merely desirable traits. They were seen as sufficient for eudaimonia, for a flourishing life, regardless of external circumstances. A person could be virtuous even in poverty, sickness, or imprisonment. In fact, challenges often provided opportunities to practice virtue. This emphasis on virtue led to a rigorous ethical framework. The Stoics believed that emotions like fear, anger, envy, and excessive joy were passions that arose from faulty judgments about what is good or bad. By correcting these judgments through reason, one could eliminate these disruptive passions and achieve apatheia. For example, anger often arises from the judgment that someone has wronged us or that things should be different. A Stoic would question this judgment, recognizing that the other person's actions are outside their control and their own anger only harms themselves. The Stoics also had a sophisticated understanding of cosmology and the natural world. They believed in a rational, ordered cosmos governed by logos, a universal reason or divine providence that permeates everything. Understanding and living in accordance with this logos was central to their philosophy. This meant accepting the interconnectedness of all things and recognizing that every event, even seemingly negative ones, played a part in the grand design of the universe. This deterministic view did not negate free will in their minds. Rather, it meant exercising free will by choosing to align with the natural order, rather than futilely fighting against it. Practices were crucial for the Stoics. They engaged in various exercises to strengthen their minds and prepare for adversity. These included negative visualization, premeditatio malorum, contemplating potential misfortunes, loss of loved ones, poverty, illness, not to dwell on them, but to realize that they are possible and that one could endure them. This practice reduced the shock of adversity and fostered appreciation for present blessings. The view from above, imagining oneself looking down on the earth, seeing the insignificance of individual concerns in the grand scheme of the universe. This helped to cultivate perspective and detach from trivial worries. Morning and evening reflections, reviewing one's actions and judgments of the day, assessing where one acted virtuously or where they succumbed to passion. This was a form of continuous self-improvement. Journaling, writing down thoughts and reflections, as practiced by Marcus Aurelius in his Meditations, to clarify thinking and reinforce Stoic principles. The Stoic ideal was the sage, a perfectly rational and virtuous individual who achieved complete apatheia and lived in perfect harmony with nature. While acknowledging that true sagehood was perhaps unattainable for mortals, it served as a guiding star, an aspiration for continuous improvement. The journey towards wisdom, rather than the destination itself, was what mattered. The enduring appeal of Stoicism lies in its practical applicability to the challenges of everyday life. Its emphasis on self-control, resilience, and acceptance offers a powerful antidote to anxiety and stress, making it remarkably relevant even in the modern world. It is a philosophy not of grand pronouncements, but of quiet, disciplined living, finding strength and tranquility within oneself regardless of external storms. The whispers of the painted porch continue to invite us to cultivate an unshakable inner citadel, a haven of reason amidst the unpredictable currents of existence. As the echoes of Stoic resilience fade into the background, we prepare to shift our focus to a later period, one where ancient philosophical traditions intersected with new spiritual narratives, profoundly shaping the intellectual and moral landscape of a continent. Our next destination will explore how these ancient Greek and Roman ideas adapted and transformed within a burgeoning New World view. Having traversed the Hellenistic world, with its diverse paths to tranquility offered by Epicureanism and Stoicism, our journey through philosophical whispers now shifts forward in time, into the late Roman Empire and the early medieval period. This era witnessed a profound transformation in Western thought, as the established philosophical traditions of Greece and Rome began to intersect, and often clash, with the rising influence of a new spiritual and ethical framework, early Christian theology. This convergence led to a rich and complex intellectual landscape, where ancient wisdom was reinterpreted, challenged, and ultimately integrated into a new overarching worldview. One of the most significant figures in this intellectual synthesis was Augustine of Hippo. Augustine, who lived from 354 to 430 CE, was a prolific theologian and philosopher whose thought profoundly shaped Western Christianity and philosophy for over 1,000 years. His life spanned a period of immense upheaval, witnessing the decline of the Western Roman Empire and the rise of Christianity as its dominant religion. Born in Tagaste, modern-day Algeria, Augustine embarked on a long intellectual and spiritual journey before his conversion to Christianity. He initially experimented with various philosophical schools, including Manichaeism and Neoplatonism, before finding his intellectual and spiritual home in the Christian faith. His intellectual struggles and eventual conversion are famously detailed in his autobiographical work, Confessions, a landmark text in Western literature and philosophy. Before his conversion, Augustine was deeply influenced by Neoplatonism, a philosophical school that developed in the 3rd century CE, building upon and reinterpreting the ideas of Plato. Neoplatonism, with its emphasis on a transcendent, ineffable one, the ultimate source of all reality, and the concept of a hierarchical universe emanating from this one, provided Augustine with an intellectual framework for understanding spiritual reality and the nature of evil. It offered a path for the soul's ascent to the divine through intellectual and spiritual purification. This early exposure to Neoplatonism would continue to shape his Christian theology, particularly his understanding of God's transcendence and the soul's relationship to divine truth. However, Augustine eventually found Neoplatonism insufficient. While it offered a compelling vision of the divine and a path for the intellect, it lacked, in his view, a satisfactory account of the problem of evil, the necessity of grace, and the concrete reality of human sinfulness. It was through his encounter with the Christian scriptures and the teachings of figures like Ambrose of Milan that Augustine found what he considered to be the complete truth. Central to Augustine's Christian philosophy was his profound wrestling with the problem of evil. How could a good, omnipotent God allow evil to exist? He ultimately rejected the Manichaean dualism that posited two opposing cosmic forces, one good and one evil. Instead, drawing from Neoplatonic ideas, Augustine argued that evil is not a positive substance or force, but rather a privation or absence of good, much like darkness is the absence of light. Sin, for Augustine, was a turning away from God, the supreme good, and a disordered love of lesser goods. This understanding of evil as a privation became a foundational concept in Western theology. Augustine also developed a seminal theory of original sin. Building on his interpretation of the biblical account of Adam and Eve, he argued that humanity inherited a corrupted nature from their first parents, a congenital bias towards sin that rendered humans incapable of achieving salvation through their own efforts alone. This doctrine highlighted the radical need for divine grace for salvation, a concept that would become a cornerstone of Christian theology and a major point of contention during the Reformation. His understanding of time was equally groundbreaking. In Confessions, Augustine famously asked, "What then is time? If no one asks me, I know. If I wish to explain it to him who asks, I know not." He argued that time is not an objective, independently existing entity, but rather a distension or extension of the mind, particularly in memory past, attention present and expectation future. God as eternal exists outside of time, in an eternal present. This subjective, psychological understanding of time was a significant departure from earlier philosophical views and continues to influence discussions on the philosophy of time. Augustine's most ambitious work, City of God, was written in response to the sack of Rome by the Visigoths in 410 CE, an event that deeply shook the Roman world and led many pagans to blame Christianity for the empire's decline. In this monumental work, Augustine articulated a comprehensive philosophy of history and two distinct cities, the earthly city and the city of God. The earthly city is characterized by self-love and the pursuit of worldly goods, marked by conflict and impermanence. The city of God, on the other hand, is defined by the love of God, righteousness, and eternal peace. These two cities are intertwined in human history, but ultimately have different ultimate destinies. This theological framework offered comfort and meaning to Christians facing the collapse of a venerable empire, providing a grand narrative that placed historical events within a divine plan. His philosophy also emphasized the primacy of faith in the pursuit of understanding. Believe in order to understand. While reason was important, Augustine believed that true understanding of divine truths often required an initial act of faith, which then illuminated the path for rational inquiry. This approach became a hallmark of medieval Christian philosophy, where faith and reason were seen not as antagonistic forces, but as complementary tools for apprehending truth. Augustine's influence is immense. His ideas on grace, sin, free will, the nature of God, the human soul, and the philosophy of history laid much of the intellectual groundwork for medieval scholasticism, and profoundly shaped the development of Christian doctrine in both Catholicism and Protestantism. He seamlessly wove together elements of classical philosophy, particularly Platonism, with Christian revelation, creating a powerful and enduring intellectual synthesis. His introspective explorations of the human psyche, as seen in Confessions, also laid a foundation for later psychological thought. The gentle but profound whispers of Augustine invite us to consider the intersection of faith and reason, the complexities of good and evil, and the ultimate destiny of humanity. His thought marks a significant transition, bridging the ancient world with the medieval, carrying forward the torch of philosophical inquiry while illuminating it with a new spiritual light. As the Roman Empire faded and a new European order slowly began to coalesce, the philosophical whispers of antiquity were largely preserved and reinterpreted within the monasteries and burgeoning universities of the medieval world. This era, often characterized by its deep religious devotion, was far from intellectually stagnant. Instead, it saw a fervent dedication to reconciling the truths of faith with the insights of reason, a grand project that came to be known as scholasticism. At the pinnacle of this intellectual endeavor stands one of the most towering figures in Western thought, Thomas Aquinas. Thomas Aquinas, who lived from approximately 1225 to 1274 CE, was an Italian Dominican friar, priest, and immensely influential philosopher and theologian. Born into a noble family in Raccesca, Italy, he received his education at the Benedictine monastery of Monte Cassino and later at the University of Naples. His intellectual journey led him to the University of Paris, the intellectual heart of medieval Europe, where he became a student of Albertus Magnus, a prominent scholar who introduced Aquinas to the newly rediscovered works of Aristotle. This encounter with Aristotle's philosophy would prove to be a pivotal moment, not only for Aquinas personally, but for the entire trajectory of Western thought. For centuries, much of Aristotle's work had been lost to the Latin West, preserved primarily in the Islamic world. Its reintroduction through Arab and Jewish scholars in the 12th and 13th centuries presented a significant challenge to the prevailing Augustinian and Neoplatonic Christian intellectual framework. Aristotle's emphasis on empirical observation, logical reasoning, and a naturalistic understanding of the world seemed to clash with the revelation-based truths of Christian theology. Many within the Church viewed Aristotle with suspicion, fearing that his ideas would undermine faith. Aquinas, however, saw not conflict, but an opportunity for synthesis. His monumental achievement was to integrate Aristotelian philosophy into Christian theology, demonstrating that reason and faith, far from being antagonistic, could be complementary paths to truth. He argued that truth could be apprehended through both natural reason, philosophy, and divine revelation, theology, and that these two sources of truth ultimately originate from the same God and therefore cannot contradict each other. Where reason could go no further, faith provided the ultimate answers. His most famous and comprehensive work is the Summa Theologiae, Summary of Theology, an encyclopedic treatise that systematically addresses virtually every major theological and philosophical question of his time. Structured in a unique question-and-answer format, it presents objections, provides Aquinas' own reasoned arguments, and then replies to the initial objections. These arguments include the argument from motion, everything that moves is moved by something else, leading to an unmoved mover. The argument from causation, every effect has a cause, leading to a first cause. The argument from contingency, contingent beings rely on a necessary being. The argument from degrees of perfection, different degrees of perfection imply a most perfect being. And the teleological argument from design, the order and purpose in the natural world point to an intelligent designer. This meticulous, logical approach became the standard for scholastic discourse. Central to Aquinas' philosophy was his concept of God as pure act and the first cause. Drawing from Aristotle, he formulated his famous 5 ways, quinque via, to demonstrate the existence of God through reason and observation of the natural world. These arguments, while philosophical rather than theological proofs, continue to be debated and analyzed in philosophy of religion today. In ethics, Aquinas adapted Aristotle's virtue ethics to a Christian framework. He agreed with Aristotle that the ultimate human end is eudaimonia, or flourishing. But for Aquinas, this ultimate flourishing could only be fully realized in the beatific vision of God in the afterlife. He distinguished between natural virtues, like the cardinal virtues of prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance, achievable through reason and habit, and theological virtues, faith, hope, and charity, which are infused by divine grace. This synthesis provided a comprehensive moral philosophy that integrated human reason with divine law. Aquinas also developed a sophisticated theory of natural law. He argued that God's eternal law is discoverable by human reason through observation of the natural order. By examining human nature and the purposes inherent in creation, one can discern universal moral principles that are binding on all people, regardless of specific religious revelation. For example, the natural inclination to preserve life leads to the moral precept against murder. This concept of natural law became a cornerstone of Catholic moral theology and influenced later legal and political thought. His understanding of the human soul was also profoundly Aristotelian. Against Platonic dualism, Aquinas argued that the soul is the form of the body, not merely imprisoned within it. The human being is a composite unity of body and soul, with the soul providing the animating principle and defining essence of the person. This allowed for a more integrated understanding of human nature, where the physical and spiritual aspects were inherently connected. Aquinas' intellectual rigor and systematic clarity earned him the title Doctor Angelicus, angelic doctor. His work provided a robust intellectual foundation for Christian theology that endured for centuries, becoming the official philosophy of the Catholic Church. He showed that faith did not require intellectual sacrifice, but rather could be deepened and understood more profoundly through rational inquiry. The quiet dedication to truth, wherever it may be found, whether in Scripture or in the observable world, defines his monumental contribution. Having explored the integration of reason and faith in the medieval West through the lens of scholasticism, our philosophical journey now takes us back to the East, revisiting a tradition whose ancient roots produced a vibrant and evolving intellectual landscape. The various schools of Indian philosophy that followed the Buddha, particularly those that focused on logic, epistemology, and the nature of consciousness. The gentle, logical whispers of Thomas Aquinas remind us that even in an age dominated by faith, the human mind relentlessly pursued understanding, seeking to harmonize seemingly disparate truths into a coherent, majestic whole. His legacy is a testament to the enduring power of reason, meticulously applied to the grandest questions of existence. While Buddhism offered a path to liberation from suffering, other Hindu philosophical schools, alongside later Buddhist developments, provided intricate systems for understanding reality through rigorous analysis and debate. Among these, the Nyaya Vaisheshika schools stand out for their profound contributions to logic and atomism. The Nyaya school, meaning rules or logic, is one of the 6 orthodox Astika schools of Hindu philosophy. It is primarily concerned with the means of acquiring valid knowledge, pramana. Founded by the ancient sage Gautama, different from Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, its foundational text is the Nyaya Sutras. The central aim of Nyaya was to establish a sound epistemology, a theory of knowledge that could withstand rigorous scrutiny and provide a reliable basis for philosophical and spiritual inquiry. They believed that by understanding the nature of knowledge, one could ultimately achieve liberation from suffering, much like the Buddhist goal, but through a different intellectual path. The Nyaya school systematically identified and analyzed 4 reliable means, pramanas, by which humans gain valid knowledge. 1 perception, pratyaksha, direct sensory experience. This is fundamental, but Nyaya philosophers meticulously distinguished between valid and invalid perceptions, recognizing that illusions and hallucinations occur. Valid perception, they argued, must be non-erroneous, non-conceptual initially, and associated with sense organs. 2 inference, anumana, knowledge derived through reasoning. This is akin to deductive logic. Nyaya laid out a highly formalized structure for inference, including the famous 5-membered syllogism, which is more elaborate than Aristotle's, incorporating a proposition, a reason, an example, an application, and a conclusion. For instance, the mountain has fire proposition because it has smoke reason. Wherever there is smoke, there is fire, as in a kitchen example. The mountain has smoke, which is pervaded by fire application. Therefore, the mountain has fire conclusion. This detailed structure aimed to ensure the validity and reliability of inferences. 3. Comparison, upamana, knowledge gained through analogy or similarity. For example, if someone has never seen a wild ox, gavia, but has been told it resembles a cow. They can recognize a wild ox when they encounter one in the forest based on this comparison. 4. Testimony, Shabda, knowledge derived from the reliable statements of trustworthy persons or scriptures. For Nyaya, this primarily referred to the Vedic texts and the words of enlightened sages, but also encompassed the reliable reports of experts. The Nyaya school was renowned for its sophisticated theory of fallacies, errors in reasoning that lead to invalid conclusions. By meticulously identifying these fallacies, they sought to purify intellectual discourse and ensure that arguments were logically sound. This dedication to formal logic made Nyaya a powerful tool for philosophical debate and critical inquiry within ancient Indian intellectual circles. Closely associated with Nyaya is the Vaisheshika school, founded by Kanada, also known as Kashyapa. Vaisheshika is a naturalistic and atomistic philosophy, primarily concerned with understanding the ultimate constituents of the universe and the categories of reality. While Nyaya focused on epistemology, how we know, Vaisheshika focused on ontology, what exists. Together, Nyaya Vaisheshika are often treated as a single, combined school, Nyaya Vaisheshika Darshana, because of their complementary nature and shared methodological approaches. The Vaisheshika school proposed that all physical objects in the universe are reducible to a finite number of indivisible, eternal and irreducible particles called anus, atoms. These atoms are thought to be eternal, having specific qualities like color, taste, smell, and touch. The combination of these atoms, under the influence of an unseen force adrishta, guided by divine will, leads to the formation of all complex substances. This was one of the earliest atomic theories in the world, developed independently of the Greek atomists like Democritus and Leucippus. Vaisheshika identified 6 categories padarthas of reality, which serve as the fundamental components of existence. 1. Substance, dravya, the substratum of qualities and actions, e.g., earth, water, fire, air, ether, time, space, soul, mind. 2. Quality, guna, inherent properties of substances, e.g., color, taste, number, conjunction, disjunction. 3. Action, karma, movement or motion, e.g., throwing, contracting, expanding. 4. Generality, samanya, universals or common properties shared by a class of things, e.g., cowness for all cows. 5. Particularity, vishesha, unique individual properties that distinguish one substance from another. This category gives the school its name. 6. Inherence, samavaya, the inseparable relation between a substance and its qualities, actions, generality, or particularity, e.g., the relation between cloth and thread. Later Vaisheshika thinkers also added a 7th category, absence, abhava, recognizing that non-existence or negation is also a valid category of reality. The ultimate goal of the Nyaya Vaisheshika schools, much like other Indian philosophies, was liberation, moksha, or apavarga, which they believed could be achieved by understanding the true nature of reality and the self through correct knowledge. By eliminating false knowledge and understanding the atomic nature of the world and the distinctness of the soul from matter, one could break free from the cycle of rebirth, samsara, and attain lasting freedom. While these schools were foundational to Hindu thought, it's worth noting that later Buddhist philosophers also developed incredibly sophisticated systems of logic and epistemology in response to and in dialogue with Nyaya. Dignaga and Dharmakirti, prominent Buddhist logicians of the 5th to 7th centuries CE, refined and expanded upon Indian logical traditions, contributing immensely to the study of inference, perception, and the nature of knowledge. Their works are studied even today in Tibetan Buddhist monastic universities. The detailed and meticulous approach of Nyaya to logic and the constituents of reality offers a calming sense of order. Their precise categories and rules of inference provide a framework for understanding the world in a structured, analytical way. It is a philosophy that encourages a quiet, patient examination of the facts of existence, seeking truth not through grand narratives, but through the careful discernment of particulars. The patient whispers of ancient Indian logicians invite us to sharpen our minds and observe the world with clarity. As these echoes of precise logic and atomic theory gently recede, we prepare to shift our focus to another significant branch of Indian thought, one that delves deeply into the nature of consciousness, illusion, and the ultimate oneness of reality, offering a profound spiritual path quite distinct from the analytical rigor of Nyaya. Having considered the meticulous logic and atomic theories of the Nyaya schools, our journey through the philosophical whispers of ancient India now turns to a tradition that delves into the very essence of existence, consciousness, and the ultimate nature of reality, offering a path to liberation through profound insight rather than mere intellectual analysis. This is the school of Vedanta, and within it, one of its most influential and enduring branches, Advaita Vedanta. This philosophical system provides a unique and powerful perspective on the relationship between the individual self, the universe, and the ultimate divine reality, often leading to a serene and profound understanding of unity. Vedanta, meaning the end of the Vedas, or the culmination of Vedic knowledge, refers to the philosophical systems that interpret and elaborate upon the Upanishads, which are the concluding and most philosophical sections of the Vedas, the ancient sacred texts of Hinduism. The Upanishads themselves are rich with contemplative dialogues and mystical insights, often presenting paradoxical statements about reality. Over centuries, various thinkers developed distinct schools of Vedanta, each offering a unique interpretation of these profound texts. Among them, Advaita Vedanta, primarily formalized by the great philosopher Shankara, c. 780–820 CE, stands as a cornerstone of Indian philosophy. Shankara, born in Kerala, India, was a brilliant and prolific scholar, poet, and mystic. He traveled extensively across India, engaging in philosophical debates and establishing monastic centers, mathas, that continue to thrive today. His mission was to revive and consolidate the non-dualistic teachings of the Upanishads, presenting a coherent philosophical system that would counter various dualistic and materialistic interpretations of reality. The central tenet of Advaita Vedanta is Advaita, meaning non-duality. This doctrine asserts that ultimately there is no real distinction or duality between the individual soul or self, Atman, and the ultimate reality or cosmic consciousness, Brahman. The famous Upanishadic dictum, Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman and Tat Tvamasi, thou art that, encapsulate this profound identity. The perceived world of multiplicity, with its distinct objects and separate individuals, is considered to be an illusion or a superimposition, Maya, on the one true reality, Brahman. Brahman in Advaita Vedanta is the supreme, ultimate reality, absolute, unchanging, infinite, and beyond all attributes and distinctions. It is the ground of all being, the source from which everything emanates and to which everything returns. It is often described as Satchitananda, existence, consciousness, bliss, absolute, indicating its inherent nature as pure being, pure awareness, and pure joy. It is not a personal God in the traditional sense, but rather the impersonal, all-pervading substratum of existence. Atman is the individual self, the innermost essence of a living being. In Advaita, the Atman is not merely a part of Brahman, but is, in reality, identical with Brahman. The apparent separation between the individual soul and the ultimate reality is due to Maya. Maya is a crucial concept in Advaita Vedanta. It is often translated as illusion, but it is more accurately understood as a cosmic power that veils the true nature of reality and projects the apparent world of names and forms, Namarupa. Maya is not unreal in the sense of being non-existent, but it is not ultimately real in the way Brahman is. It is a mysterious power that creates the appearance of duality and multiplicity, binding individuals to the cycle of samsara, birth, death, and rebirth, through ignorance avidya. It is like the illusion of a snake in a rope. The snake is not real, but the rope is, and the illusion persists until true knowledge dispels it. The primary problem for human beings, according to Advaita, is this ignorance avidya of their true nature. Individuals mistakenly identify with their limited body, mind, and ego, believing themselves to be separate from Brahman. This mistaken identification leads to suffering, desire, and the perpetuation of the cycle of samsara. The path to liberation, moksha, in Advaita Vedanta is through the attainment of true knowledge, jnana, specifically the direct, intuitive realization of the identity of Atman and Brahman. This is not merely intellectual understanding, but a transformative experience. The traditional path to this realization involves several stages. 1. Shravana, listening, hearing, listening to the teachings of the Upanishads and enlightened teachers. 2. Manana, reflection, contemplation, deeply reflecting on these teachings, using reason to clear doubts and understand their logical coherence. 3. Nididhyasana, meditation, deep contemplation, sustained meditation to internalize the truth, leading to direct, intuitive experience of non-duality. This process often involves ethical discipline, self-control, dispassion towards worldly pleasures, and a strong desire for liberation. Renunciation of worldly attachments and the pursuit of inner purification are seen as essential steps to prepare the mind for this profound realization. The role of a guru, spiritual teacher, is also considered vital in guiding the aspirant through this difficult path. Shankara's philosophy had a profound impact on Hinduism, revitalizing the Vedic tradition and offering a powerful philosophical response to other schools of thought, including various forms of Buddhism, some of which he debated vigorously. His emphasis on the oneness of existence, the illusory nature of the dualistic world, and the path of knowledge resonated deeply with many. Advaita Vedanta offers a deeply calming and expansive view of reality. The realization that the individual self is not separate from the ultimate reality can bring about a profound sense of peace, interconnectedness, and freedom from the anxieties of the ego. The dissolving of perceived distinctions, the understanding that the apparent turmoil of the world is a mere play of Maya, can lead to a quiet serenity. It is a philosophy that invites us to look beyond the surface, to recognize the underlying unity of all things, and to rest in the boundless awareness that is our true nature. The subtle whispers of Advaita lead us to the profound silence of non-duality. As the echoes of this ultimate unity begin to gently fade, we prepare to shift our attention once more to the Western intellectual tradition, but to a different era, one where reason began to assert its independence from theological dogma, laying the groundwork for modern scientific thought and a renewed emphasis on human potential. From the contemplative depths of Advaita Vedanta, our philosophical journey now leaps across centuries and continents, arriving in Europe during a transformative period known as the Renaissance and early modern era. This was a time of immense intellectual ferment, where the rediscovery of classical texts, coupled with burgeoning scientific advancements and religious reformation, challenged the established medieval worldview. A new spirit of inquiry emerged, one that placed increasing emphasis on human reason, individual autonomy, and the scientific method. This shift laid the groundwork for what we now call modern philosophy, and at its very inception, we find the quiet, revolutionary whisper of René Descartes. René Descartes, who lived from 1596 to 1650 CE, was a French philosopher, mathematician, and scientist, often regarded as the father of modern philosophy. Educated at the Jesuit College of La Fleche, Descartes was initially trained in the scholastic tradition, but he became deeply dissatisfied with the uncertainties and inconsistencies he perceived in existing philosophical systems. He sought to establish philosophy on a foundation of absolute certainty, akin to the certainty found in mathematics. His quest for an unshakable bedrock of knowledge led him to a radical method of doubt. Descartes famously began by systematically doubting everything he thought he knew. He questioned the reliability of sensory experience, recognizing that our senses can deceive us, as in optical illusions. He even entertained the possibility of an evil demon or malicious genius, intensely powerful and clever, who was deceiving him about everything, including the truths of mathematics. This radical skepticism, however, was not an end in itself, but a methodical tool to arrive at indubitable truths. From the depths of this doubt, Descartes arrived at his most famous pronouncement, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. Even if an evil demon were deceiving him about everything else, the very act of doubting of thinking proved that he existed as a thinking thing. This was his Archimedean point, his first unshakable truth, from which he believed all other knowledge could be derived. The I here was understood not as a physical body, but as a pure thinking substance, a mind. This led to Descartes' famous substance dualism, the idea that mind or soul and body are two distinct and fundamentally different substances. The mind is an unextended thinking substance, while the body is an extended, non-thinking substance. They interact, he believed, in the pineal gland of the brain, although the precise mechanism of this interaction remained a challenge for his philosophy. This dualistic view of mind and matter profoundly influenced Western thought, setting the stage for centuries of debate in philosophy of mind and even contemporary neuroscience. Having established the certainty of his own existence as a thinking being, Descartes then sought to prove the existence of God. He offered several arguments, including a version of the ontological argument, contending that the very idea of a perfect being, God, implies its existence, just as the idea of a triangle implies that its angles sum to 180 degrees. He also argued that his own existence as a thinking being, capable of conceiving of perfection, must have been caused by something perfect, namely God. For Descartes, God's existence was crucial because a perfect God would not be a deceiver, thus guaranteeing the reliability of clear and distinct ideas, including those derived from mathematics and rational deduction. With the certainty of his own existence and the existence of a non-deceiving God, Descartes then proceeded to establish the reliability of the external world. He argued that since God is perfect and good, he would not allow us to be systematically deceived about the existence of physical reality if we clearly and distinctly perceived it. Therefore, the external world, as perceived through clear and distinct ideas, could be trusted. This allowed him to rebuild knowledge on a rational foundation, moving from innate ideas and deduction to understanding the physical world. Descartes also made significant contributions to mathematics, particularly the development of analytical geometry, which unified geometry and algebra and is still fundamental today. His scientific method emphasized the importance of mathematical reasoning and deductive inference from clear and distinct ideas, often applying mechanical principles to understand the physical universe, including animal bodies. He viewed the universe as a grand machine, governed by precise mathematical laws. His major works, including Discourse on the Method and Meditations on First Philosophy, are landmarks in the history of philosophy, marking a clear break from medieval scholasticism. Descartes encouraged individuals to think for themselves, to question authority, and to rely on their own rational faculties to arrive at truth. This emphasis on individual reason and systematic doubt was revolutionary, ushering in an era of Enlightenment thought that would profoundly shape politics, science, and intellectual life across Europe. However, Descartes' radical dualism also presented persistent problems. How exactly do a non-physical mind and a physical body interact? This mind-body problem became a central challenge for subsequent philosophers. Despite these challenges, his insistence on a firm foundation for knowledge and his emphasis on the power of human reason ignited an intellectual revolution. The quiet, solitary pursuit of certainty in Descartes' study, his methodical dismantling of old assumptions, and his triumphant reconstruction of knowledge from the bedrock of the cogito represent a profound turning point. His whispers invite us to embark on our own journeys of doubt and discovery, to seek clarity and foundational truths within the quiet confines of our own minds. As the echoes of Cartesian certainty begin to fade, we prepare to shift our gaze to another monumental figure of the early modern era, one who, while also believing in the power of reason, offered a different account of how we acquire knowledge, emphasizing the role of experience rather than innate ideas, thereby laying the foundations for empiricism. From the introspective, doubt-laden journey of René Descartes, who found certainty in the act of thinking itself, our philosophical whisper now shifts across the English Channel to another towering figure of the early modern era. While sharing Descartes' commitment to reason and the pursuit of knowledge, this philosopher offered a fundamentally different account of how that knowledge is acquired, emphasizing the role of sensory experience above all else. This was John Locke, a key figure in British empiricism, whose ideas would profoundly shape political thought, epistemology, and the very concept of the human mind. John Locke, who lived from 1632 to 1704 CE, was an English philosopher and physician. Unlike Descartes, who was driven by a quest for absolute mathematical certainty, Locke was primarily concerned with understanding the limits and foundations of human knowledge, and with establishing principles for good governance and individual liberty. His seminal work, an essay concerning human understanding, published in 1689, is a cornerstone of empiricist philosophy. In it, Locke set out to investigate the origin, certainty, and extent of human knowledge, as well as the grounds and degrees of belief, opinion, and assent. Locke famously argued against the prevailing notion of innate ideas, a concept championed by Descartes and many rationalists, who believed that certain fundamental truths or concepts were hardwired into the human mind from birth. Instead, Locke proposed that the mind at birth is a tabula rasa, a blank slate or white paper, void of all characters, without any ideas. All knowledge, he asserted, originates from experience. This was a radical departure, emphasizing the mind's passive role in receiving impressions before actively processing them. Experience for Locke came in two primary forms: one sensation. This is the immediate input from our five external senses: sight, hearing, touch, taste, smell. Through sensation, we acquire ideas of external objects and their qualities, such as red, hard, sweet, or loud. 2. Reflection. This is the mind's observation of its own internal operations, such as thinking, doubting, believing, reasoning, and willing. Through reflection, we acquire ideas of our own mental activities. All complex ideas, Locke argued, are ultimately built up from these simple ideas received through sensation and reflection. The mind, though initially passive in receiving simple ideas, actively combines, compares, and abstracts these ideas to form more complex ones. For example, the complex idea of an apple is a combination of simple ideas like redness, roundness, sweetness, and crispness, all derived from sensory experience. Locke also distinguished between primary and secondary qualities of objects. Primary qualities are inherent properties of objects themselves, independent of any observer. These include qualities like solidity, extension, size, motion, rest, number, and figure, shape. These qualities produce ideas in us that resemble the qualities themselves. For example, a chair truly has a certain shape and occupies a certain amount of space. Secondary qualities, on the other hand, are powers in objects to produce sensations in us, but they do not resemble the qualities as they exist in the object. These include color, sound, taste, and smell. For example, the redness of an apple is not an inherent property of the apple itself, in the same way its shape is. Rather, it is the apple's power to produce the sensation of red in our minds under certain conditions. This distinction would have significant implications for later philosophical and scientific thought. Beyond epistemology, Locke made groundbreaking contributions to political philosophy, profoundly influencing the Enlightenment, the American Revolution, and the development of liberal democracy. In his two treatises of government, he articulated a theory of natural rights and the social contract, challenging the divine right of kings. Locke argued that individuals possess inherent natural rights to life, liberty, and property. These rights are not granted by governments but are inherent to human nature, given by God. In a state of nature, prior to the formation of government, all individuals are free and equal, governed by the law of nature, reason, which dictates that no one ought to harm another in their life, health, liberty, or possessions. However, the state of nature, while free, lacks established laws, impartial judges, and effective enforcement mechanisms, making the enjoyment of natural rights insecure. To remedy this, individuals consent to form a social contract, establishing a civil government to protect their natural rights. The legitimacy of government, for Locke, derives from the consent of the governed. If a government fails to uphold its end of the social contract, that is, if it infringes upon the natural rights of its citizens, then the people have the right to resist and even overthrow it. This revolutionary idea provided a powerful justification for revolution against tyrannical rule. Locke also advocated for the separation of powers within government, though not as rigidly as later thinkers like Montesquieu, primarily dividing it into legislative and executive branches. He also argued for religious toleration, believing that the state should not interfere with an individual's religious beliefs, provided they do not threaten public order. His letter concerning toleration is a foundational text in the history of religious freedom. The quiet, meticulous observations of John Locke on the workings of the human mind and the foundations of just governance laid a powerful groundwork for the Enlightenment. His emphasis on experience as the source of knowledge empowered scientific inquiry and challenged dogmatic assumptions. His political ideas, advocating for individual liberty and limited government, continue to resonate deeply in democratic societies worldwide. The gentle whispers of his empiricist philosophy invite us to reflect on how our own understanding is built, brick by experiential brick, and to consider the inherent dignity and rights of every individual. From the clear and distinct ideas of Descartes and the blank slate of John Locke, our philosophical whisper now guides us to the apex of British empiricism, where a profound and unsettling question was posed. If all knowledge comes from experience, how can we be certain of anything beyond our own perceptions? This was the central inquiry of David Hume, a Scottish philosopher whose radical skepticism would awaken subsequent thinkers from their dogmatic slumber and fundamentally alter the trajectory of Western philosophy. As the echoes of Locke's blank slate and natural rights begin to settle, we prepare to encounter another profound voice from the British empiricist tradition, one who would take Locke's principles to their most radical conclusion, challenging the very notion of external reality and paving the way for a skeptical turn in philosophy. David Hume, who lived from 1711 to 1776 CE, was a Scottish philosopher, historian, economist, and essayist, and is widely regarded as one of the most important figures in the history of Western philosophy and the Scottish Enlightenment. His major philosophical works, a treatise of human nature and an inquiry concerning human understanding, systematically applied the empiricist principles of Locke and George Berkeley to their logical conclusions, often arriving at conclusions that were deeply unsettling to his contemporaries. Unlike his predecessors, Hume was not primarily interested in establishing certainty, but rather in exposing the limits of human reason and the reliance of our knowledge on custom and habit. Hume began by distinguishing between impressions and ideas. Impressions are our vivid, immediate perceptions, what we directly experience through our senses, sensations, and our immediate feelings, passions, emotions. They are strong and lively. Ideas are the fainter copies of impressions, formed when we reflect upon or remember our impressions. For example, the sensation of seeing a red apple is an impression. The memory of that red apple is an idea. All our ideas, Hume argued, are ultimately derived from impressions. There is no idea, no concept, in our mind that was not first experienced as an impression. This was a direct challenge to the rationalist belief in innate ideas. Applying this principle, Hume then meticulously examined several fundamental concepts that philosophers had traditionally taken for granted, demonstrating that they lacked empirical justification. His most famous critiques were directed at the concepts of causality, the external world, and the self. Regarding causality, Hume argued that we never perceive a necessary connection between cause and effect. When we say that event A causes event B, what we actually observe is simply that event A precedes event B, and that event B follows event A, and that this conjunction has been constantly conjoined in our experience. For instance, when one billiard ball strikes another and the second one moves, we perceive the first ball moving, then hitting the second, then the second moving. We do not perceive an invisible force or necessary connection linking these two events. Our belief in causality, Hume contended, is not based on reason or perception of a necessary link, but rather on the psychological habit or custom formed by repeated observation of constant conjunctions. Because we have always seen fire produce heat, we expect it to do so in the future. This expectation, however, is a product of our minds, not an objective feature of reality itself. This powerful critique of induction posed a significant challenge to the scientific method and continues to be a central problem in philosophy of science. Hume also extended his skepticism to the external world. If all our knowledge comes from impressions, how can we know that there is a world of objects existing independently of our perceptions? We only ever experience our sensations of objects, not the objects themselves. While our common sense leads us to believe in a stable, external world, Hume argued that this belief is ultimately based on an instinctive, natural tendency of the mind, rather than on any rational proof. We cannot logically prove that what we perceive corresponds to an external reality. Perhaps even more unsettling was Hume's critique of the self. Many philosophers, including Descartes, had argued for the existence of a continuous, enduring self or soul that persists through time. Hume, however, searched for an impression of this self. He looked inward but found only a bundle or collection of constantly changing perceptions. I can never catch myself at any time without a perception, and never can observe anything but the perception. He concluded that there is no persistent, simple, unchanging self that underlies our experiences. Rather, the self is merely a bundle or collection of different perceptions, which succeed each other with inconceivable rapidity, and are in a perpetual flux and movement. This radical notion of the self challenged deep-seated intuitions and had profound implications for personal identity and moral responsibility. Despite his skeptical conclusions, Hume was not advocating for abandoning reason or knowledge. Instead, he sought to show that much of what we take for granted as rational knowledge is actually based on non-rational foundations, such as custom, habit, and natural instincts. For Hume, philosophy's role was not to provide ultimate certainties, but to clarify the nature of our beliefs and the limitations of our understanding. He believed that while abstract reasoning could be pushed to skeptical extremes, in practical life, our natural instincts and common sense would always prevail. Hume's influence cannot be overstated. He awakened Immanuel Kant from his dogmatic slumber, prompting Kant to develop his own critical philosophy to address Hume's challenges. Hume's arguments also laid much of the groundwork for logical positivism, pragmatism, and other empirical and analytical movements in the 20th century. His meticulous analysis of human experience and his unwavering commitment to following the argument wherever it led, even to uncomfortable conclusions, made him a truly revolutionary thinker. The quiet, penetrating whispers of David Hume invite us to question our deepest assumptions, to look closely at the origins of our beliefs, and to embrace a certain intellectual humility regarding the limits of what we can truly know. His skepticism, though initially disquieting, ultimately clears the path for a more honest and grounded understanding of the human condition and the nature of knowledge itself. From the relentless empiricism and profound skepticism of David Hume, which seemed to dissolve the very ground beneath our feet, our philosophical whisper now ushers us into the profound and complex world of Immanuel Kant. This German philosopher, who lived from 1724 to 1804 CE, spent his entire life in Königsberg, now Kaliningrad, Russia, leading a remarkably disciplined and methodical existence. Yet from this outwardly unassuming life emerged a philosophical system so comprehensive and revolutionary that it fundamentally reshaped metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, and aesthetics, forever altering the course of Western thought. Kant recognized the profound challenges posed by Hume. If, as Hume argued, all knowledge comes from experience, and we can't truly perceive causation or the external world, then how is science possible? How can we have universal and necessary truths in physics or mathematics? Kant was convinced that Hume's skepticism, while powerful, was ultimately untenable. He believed that while experience is indeed the source of the content of our knowledge, the structure of our knowledge, the very way we perceive and understand the world, is contributed by the mind itself. This insight led to his famous Copernican revolution in philosophy. Just as Nicolaus Copernicus proposed that the Earth revolves around the Sun, rather than the other way around, Kant proposed that objects of experience conform to the structure of our minds, rather than our minds passively conforming to objects. In other words, our minds are not merely passive receivers of sensory data. They actively shape and organize that data according to innate categories and intuitions. We do not simply perceive the world as it is in itself. We perceive the world as it appears to us, filtered and structured by the inherent capacities of human understanding. This led Kant to a crucial distinction between the phenomenal world and the noumenal world. The phenomenal world, or phenomena, is the world as it appears to us, the world of experience, shaped by our sensory perceptions and the categories of our understanding. This is the only world we can truly know and experience. The noumenal world, or noumena, on the other hand, is the world of things in themselves, independent of our experience and the structuring activity of our minds. This world, while existing, is fundamentally unknowable to us. We can think about it, but we can never directly experience or fully comprehend it. Within the phenomenal world, Kant argued, our minds apply certain innate categories of understanding to make sense of sensory data. These categories include concepts like causality, substance, unity, plurality, necessity, and possibility. For instance, we don't learn causality from experience, as Hume suggested. Rather, our minds are structured in such a way that we impose the concept of causality onto our sensory experiences, making it possible to understand the world as a coherent series of cause and effect relationships. These categories are transcendental in the sense that they are necessary conditions for any possible experience. This framework allowed Kant to preserve the possibility of scientific knowledge and universal truths. For example, he argued that mathematical truths, like 2 + 2 = 4 or the rules of geometry, are not derived from experience, but are synthetic a priori judgments. They are synthetic because they expand our knowledge, and a priori because they are known independently of experience, arising from the very structure of our spatial and temporal intuition. Similarly, the laws of physics, like cause and effect, are not merely empirical generalizations, but reflect the necessary ways in which our minds organize the world. Beyond epistemology, Kant made equally profound contributions to ethics. He sought to establish a moral philosophy based on pure reason, independent of religious dogma, personal inclinations, or anticipated consequences. His ethical system is known as deontological ethics, focusing on duty and moral principles rather than outcomes. Central to Kant's ethics is the concept of the categorical imperative, unlike a hypothetical imperative, which tells us what to do if we want to achieve a particular goal, e.g., if you want to be healthy, exercise. A categorical imperative commands us unconditionally, regardless of our desires or goals. It is a universal moral law that applies to all rational beings. Kant formulated the categorical imperative in several ways, but two are particularly famous. 1. The formula of universal law. Act only according to that maxim whereby you can, at the same time, will that it should become a universal law. This means that an action is morally permissible only if its underlying principle maxim could be consistently willed by everyone without contradiction. For example, lying would be immoral because if everyone lied, trust would collapse, and the very concept of communication would become meaningless, rendering the act of lying ineffective. 2. The formula of humanity. Act in such a way that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of any other, never merely as a means to an end, but always at the same time as an end. This principle emphasizes the inherent dignity and worth of every rational being. We should never use people as mere tools to achieve our own goals. Rather, we must always respect their autonomy and rationality as ends in themselves. For Kant, moral actions are those performed purely out of a sense of duty, out of respect for the moral law, rather than out of inclination, fear, or desire for reward. The good will, the intention to do what is right because it is right, is the only thing good without qualification. Kant also explored the concept of freedom. If the phenomenal world is determined by cause and effect, how can we be truly free? Kant argued that freedom belongs to the noumenal realm, the realm of things in themselves. As rational beings, we belong to both the phenomenal world as empirical selves and the noumenal world as rational agents capable of choosing according to the moral law. This distinction allowed him to reconcile the scientific understanding of a deterministic universe with the human experience of moral responsibility and freedom. His aesthetic theory, explored in the Critique of Judgment, investigated the nature of beauty and the sublime, attempting to find a rational basis for judgments of taste. He argued that judgments of beauty are subjective but claim universal validity, stemming from a harmonious free play of our cognitive faculties. Kant's legacy is immense. His critical philosophy created a paradigm shift, moving philosophy away from merely describing how the world is, to analyzing how the mind constructs its experience of the world. His ethics provided a powerful, duty-based alternative to consequentialist and virtue ethics, continuing to influence moral philosophy today. His insights laid the groundwork for German idealism and profoundly influenced subsequent philosophical movements, including Romanticism, existentialism, and analytic philosophy. The quiet, systematic whispers of Immanuel can't invite us into a world where the human mind is not a passive mirror of reality, but an active architect of its own experience, capable of both scientific understanding and moral freedom. His intricate arguments, though challenging, offer a profound appreciation for the depths of human rationality and the inherent dignity of every moral agent. From the rigorous and duty-bound ethics of Immanuel Kant, where the morality of an action rests solely on the intention behind it and its adherence to a universal moral law, our philosophical journey now gently shifts to a school of thought that looks outward, to the consequences of actions, as the ultimate arbiter of right and wrong. This is the philosophy of utilitarianism, a powerful and pervasive ethical framework that asks a deceptively simple question: what action will produce the greatest good for the greatest number of people? Its origins lie in the burgeoning social and political reform movements of modern Europe, seeking a rational and universally applicable principle for public policy and individual conduct. The foundational figure of classical utilitarianism is Jeremy Bentham, an English philosopher and legal reformer who lived from 1748 to 1832 CE. Deeply dissatisfied with what he saw as the arbitrary and often cruel laws of his time, Bentham sought a scientific and objective basis for morality and legislation. He famously declared that nature has placed mankind under the governance of two sovereign masters, pain and pleasure. From this observation, he derived his core principle, the principle of utility, or the greatest happiness principle. This principle asserts that the right action or policy is that which produces the greatest amount of happiness or pleasure, and the least amount of suffering or pain for the greatest number of individuals. For Bentham, pleasure and pain were quantifiable. He believed that all pleasures were fundamentally alike and differed only in quantity. This calculus considered several factors for each pleasure or pain, allowing one to calculate its utility and thus determine the morally right action. Intensity, how strong is the pleasure or pain? Duration, how long does it last? Certainty, uncertainty, how likely or unlikely is it to occur? Propinquity, remoteness, how near or far off is it? How soon will it happen? Fecundity, what is its likelihood of being followed by sensations of the same kind, more pleasure if it's pleasure, more pain if it's pain? Purity, what is its likelihood of not being followed by sensations of the opposite kind? Extent, how many people will be affected by it? By calculating these factors for all affected parties, one could, in theory, objectively determine the course of action that maximized overall happiness. He developed a systematic way to measure and compare these quantities, which he called the hedonic calculus. Bentham's vision was revolutionary for its time, offering a democratic and egalitarian ethical system where each counts for one, and no one for more than one. The happiness of every individual, regardless of their social standing, was to be considered equally. While Bentham laid the groundwork, it was his godson and intellectual successor, John Stuart Mill, 1806–1873 CE, who refined and popularized utilitarianism, addressing many of the criticisms leveled against Bentham's more simplistic view. Mill, also an English philosopher, economist, and political theorist, was deeply influenced by Bentham, but sought to introduce a more nuanced understanding of happiness. Mill's most significant contribution was his distinction between higher and lower pleasures. Against Bentham's purely quantitative approach, Mill argued that not all pleasures are of equal value. He famously stated, "It is better to be a human being dissatisfied than a pig satisfied. Better to be Socrates dissatisfied than a fool satisfied." For Mill, intellectual, moral, and aesthetic pleasures, e.g., reading poetry, engaging in philosophical discussion, appreciating art, were qualitatively superior to mere sensual or physical pleasures, e.g., eating, drinking, bodily comfort. He believed that those who had experienced both would prefer the higher pleasures, even if they sometimes came with greater intellectual effort or emotional complexity. This qualitative distinction aimed to elevate utilitarianism beyond a simple pursuit of crude gratification and align it more closely with human dignity and intellectual flourishing. Mill also addressed the criticism that utilitarianism could justify actions that seem intuitively wrong if they led to a greater good, such as sacrificing an innocent person for the benefit of many. While this is a complex issue within utilitarianism, Mill's work laid the groundwork for distinguishing between act utilitarianism and rule utilitarianism. Act utilitarianism, closer to Bentham's view, suggests that each individual action should be judged by its direct consequences for maximizing utility. Rule utilitarianism, which Mill leaned towards, proposes that we should instead follow general rules like do not kill or keep promises, that when universally adopted, tend to lead to the greatest good in the long run. Adhering to these rules, even if an individual instance of breaking them might produce slightly more immediate utility, is seen as leading to greater overall societal well-being and trust. Utilitarianism has had an immense impact on public policy, economics, and social reform. Its emphasis on consequences and the collective good makes it a natural fit for thinking about legislation, resource allocation, and ethical decision-making in areas like healthcare, environmental policy, and social justice. Its intuitive appeal lies in its focus on human well-being and its seemingly rational approach to balancing competing interests. It provides a clear, if sometimes challenging, criterion for evaluating actions. Does it lead to more happiness and less suffering? However, utilitarianism also faces persistent criticisms. Its potential to justify actions that violate individual rights or justice for the sake of the greater good remains a significant concern. The practical difficulties of predicting all consequences, measuring and comparing different kinds of happiness, and including all sentient beings in the calculation also present considerable challenges. Despite these complexities, the utilitarian whisper continues to resonate in contemporary debates about ethics and public policy, urging us to consider the broadest impact of our choices on the well-being of all. The quiet, calculating logic of utilitarianism invites us to think beyond our immediate desires and consider the wider ripple effects of our actions on the collective fabric of happiness. It encourages a compassionate, yet pragmatic, approach to morality, seeking the greatest possible good for the largest possible number. As the last echoes of utilitarian calculation fade into the quiet background, we find ourselves at the culmination of this extensive philosophical journey. We began with the persistent questioning of Socrates, the soaring ideals of Plato, and the grounded observations of Aristotle. We then journeyed eastward to the harmonious social order of Confucius, the effortless flow of the Taoists, and the liberating insights of the Buddha. Our steps returned to the Hellenistic world, embracing the tranquil pleasures of Epicureanism and the resilient self-mastery of Stoicism. From there, we witnessed the powerful synthesis of faith and reason with Augustine and Aquinas, bridging the ancient and the medieval. Finally, we navigated the revolutionary shifts of the early modern era, from Descartes' quest for certainty to Locke's empirical foundations, Hume's radical skepticism, Kant's architectural reconstruction of knowledge and morality, and finally, the practical, consequence-driven ethics of utilitarianism. What then can we take from this long meditation on these philosophical whispers? Perhaps not definitive answers to life's grandest questions, for such answers often remain elusive, perpetually inviting further inquiry. Instead, we gain something equally valuable, a profound appreciation for the enduring human spirit of inquiry. For millennia, across diverse cultures and challenging circumstances, humanity has grappled with the same fundamental questions, each philosopher, each school of thought, adding another layer to the rich tapestry of human understanding. These ancient whispers remind us that philosophy is not a static body of doctrines to be memorized, but a living, breathing process of questioning, reflecting, and seeking. It is a continuous conversation across time, where the insights of the past inform the dilemmas of the present, and the questions of today will undoubtedly shape the inquiries of tomorrow. The Stoic emphasis on what is within our control, the Buddhist call for mindfulness, the Confucian emphasis on harmonious relationships, the Socratic imperative to know thyself. These are not dusty artifacts of history, but timeless invitations to deeper self-awareness and more considered living. Even the most abstract metaphysical debates, like Plato's Forms or Advaita Vedanta's Brahman, offer a subtle kind of comfort. They invite us to ponder realities beyond our immediate grasp, to consider the possibility of a deeper order, a more fundamental unity, or a different perspective that transcends the everyday anxieties. In contemplating such vastness, our own small concerns can sometimes seem to recede, allowing for a profound sense of peace. The beauty of these philosophical journeys, especially when approached with a calm and open mind, lies in their ability to expand our intellectual horizons, to challenge our assumptions, and to offer new lenses through which to view the world. They provide frameworks for navigating ethical dilemmas, for understanding our own minds, and for finding our place within the grand narrative of existence. They remind us that the pursuit of wisdom is a continuous journey, filled with quiet discoveries and subtle shifts in perspective. As we conclude this particular journey, let the gentle echoes of these ancient and profound thoughts accompany you. May the questions they posed, the paths they illuminated, and the tranquility they sought offer a comforting presence. The vast landscape of human thought, with all its intricate arguments and diverse insights, stands as a testament to our shared human endeavor to make sense of it all. It is a testament to the quiet, persistent effort of thinkers who, often in solitude, wrestled with the deepest mysteries, leaving behind whispers that continue to guide, inspire, and soothe. May your own reflections on these philosophical whispers lead you to a state of calm repose, a deep and peaceful understanding, and a renewed appreciation for the quiet power of thought itself. The conversation continues always. Good night.